Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Walk Show podcast. This is your host, Walker Neer. Today's show, as always, is brought to you by nobody. However, I would like to mention Pick Up Your Sticks, which is my other podcast that I co-host with Brett Lindley. Pick Up Your Sticks is a podcast all about video games, but instead of just doing news and reviews or current events in gaming, Brett and I try and talk about why gaming matters. We explore old games, new games, games that we've been playing recently, games that we haven't played in a long time, but just things that really meant something to us, and try and talk about how gaming affects our lives outside of just serving as a form of entertainment. So if you like the Walk Show and you like the long-form discussions we've got here, then I think you'll really enjoy Pick Up Your Sticks. And you can listen to Pick Up Your Sticks on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts or wherever you listen to this, you can also find Pick Up Your Sticks. As always, today's music is made by Misha Zarin, so thank you very much, Misha, for providing the music. And as far as the topic for today's show, I actually couldn't be more excited. I have wanted to do this episode for quite some time, and I've wanted to record with this person for quite some time. And that person is Nick Cunningham, who's a dear friend of mine for the majority of my life at this point. And the topic we're going to discuss is the Matrix movies. Now, the Matrix movies are certainly not new. The first one came out in 1999, and the second and third one came out in 2003. But they're movies that have resonated with Nick and I since we saw them when they first came out. I own one painting that was a gift. I didn't purchase it myself, but it was a gift. And it is a painting of Trinity holding the red pill, and it's a super dope painting. But I just absolutely love The Matrix. And while the first Matrix movie gets plenty of love, I feel like the second and third Matrix movies don't really get the credit that they deserve most of the time. So Nick and I just kind of sat down and decided to talk about what it is that we like about them so much, and kind of what scenes stand out to us, and what we think it means, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, just really love the Matrix movies. Something that we mentioned briefly, but don't really get into enough, I think, is the Animatrix. If you listen to the Walk Show episode about Love, Death, and Robots, then you would have heard me talk about the Animatrix on that, because it kind of compares to Love, Death, and Robots. But the Animatrix is kind of an anime. It's not even really a series, but it's a series of animated shorts that are kind of a companion to The Matrix. They don't feature the same characters, and they don't necessarily follow the same storyline in as far as the actual specific events of The Matrix, but they take place in the same world that The Matrix is in. So you kind of get stories from outside of the context of Neo and Morpheus and that sort of stuff. Two of the Animatrix shorts specifically actually go back and show how the world was before the machines took over, and kind of how that collapse happened. And it's super good. It's one of my favorite things that I've seen. Not just animated, just period. It's excellent. Another one of the shorts from the Animatrix it's this guy who is a track star, and he's able to basically, he doesn't know that he's like cracking the Matrix, if you will. But he's able to run faster than he should be able to, because he's in the Matrix, even though he doesn't consciously recognize it. And so some agents come and shut that down. But there's another animated movie called Redline that is one of my absolute favorite anime movies. It's super cool. It's just about a car race in outer space in the future. To try and describe it beyond that would be too much. But suffice it to say, Redline is an excellent thing, and the people who animated Redline are the same people who animated that one episode of the Animatrix with the Sprinter. So if you've seen the Animatrix and you know what I'm talking about, then you should absolutely check out Redline if you haven't, because that Sprinter episode of the Animatrix is gorgeous, and Redline is also in that same vein. Without further ado, let's get over to the conversation. All right, well, like I said in the intro, super excited today to have my dear friend Nick Cunningham join the Walk Show. So, Nick, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So, the Matrix movies have been some of our favorite movies, I mean, since we first saw them. I A lot of people like the first Matrix movie, but the second and third ones get a pretty bad rap. But you and I are pretty strong in our opinion that the whole trilogy holds up the whole time. Like I don't have a problem with any of the movies. Like when I first saw all three, the third one I was a little more iffy on than the other two, but as time has gone on, I just like the third one just as well as the other two.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I think it's also just difficult with trilogies, you have to end your second movie somewhere, and typically it tends to be like the climax or the pinnacle of the story. So naturally, if you split it into three parts, three movies, you wind up with the third one being very drastically different than the second one in resolving the story instead of being a very action-packed go 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 kind
And
of
building
situation.
it. Yeah, like in the Lord of the Rings, that trilogy. I mean, I think most people think that the second one is probably the best. I know I always kind of felt that way. But to that point, it's also the one that doesn't actually have to resolve anything. It just gets to be fun the whole 4 hours or however long that movie
It's
is.
action packed, and you've got the towers and the fighting and the
Right. And you get cool stuff in the other ones, but yeah, ultimately they have to wrap it up or whatever, resolve it, and you don't get that in the second one. So I want to start by talking about the first one. We'll just kind of go in order to some extent, I guess. But so for me, my exposure to the first movie, I had no idea that it was a movie coming out. I had no idea anything. I didn't, nothing. My mom came home from work on a Friday, and I was like a freshman or something in high school probably, and said, hey, a bunch of people at work are talking about this new movie called The Matrix. Do you want to go see it tonight? And I said, sure. No idea anything. I had no idea what it was about. I asked her if she knew anything, and she said no. All the ads for it just say, what is The Matrix? So I don't really know either. And so we go and see it, and it's literally the only movie I can ever say that I was actually on the edge of my seat in the theater while watching it, because I was just completely immersed and enamored by the entire thing. Like, I had no idea what to expect. I had never seen anything like it. I had never considered anything like that. All of it was outside the scope of my, perception of what a movie could be. And yeah, literally just leaned forward with my knees on my arms and resting my hands on my chin or whatever, and just completely glued to the screen. I don't know. It's just such a cool experience. And I remember little stupid things like the first time you see Neo and he's asleep at his computer and he's got music playing, and it actually is Massive Attack, which we later became big fans of.
Yeah, definitely.
But at that time, I remember hearing it and being like, what song is that? Like, I want to hear music like that. Like, because yet again, I've never heard that. Like, I listened to whatever MTV plays or, at that time.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, you've seen more animes and stuff than I have, though. So had you seen stuff that kind of was in that direction more at all, or did it completely shock you as well?
No, it definitely shocked me, I would say, as well. It's on the one hand, I think it was probably the perfect timing for us at that age. I forget exactly how old we were.
Yeah, 14, 15, something like that.
You're starting to see the world in your own eyes as a growing adolescent, right? Mm-hmm. So you start considering things more, and that the Matrix specifically creates a space where it's almost Twilight Zone-y or something,
Right.
where it's like you get these what ifs for things that you hadn't necessarily considered before. Mm-hmm. So it's captivating, I think, in the sense that it kind of hits that spot where the intrigue is still alive. It's not Santa Claus anymore, like when you're a kid, but it's real enough that it makes sense, but different enough that it's like, wow, what if?
Right.
So, yeah, I can't remember how I came about seeing the first movie. It might have been you brought it up to me after you saw it with your mom. Or something
I was freaking out.
Yeah, but just a thing that's consistent throughout the trilogy was that, the first movie comes out, I see that, and then I'm dying waiting for the next one to come out, which seems like an eternity, right?
It's like 5 years, legitimately.
And then, you're right. So it is a long time, but also, you see a good thing and you want to get more of it.
Right.
But I remember that distinctly from after the second one as well, where it's like, give me the whole story.
I know.
You get to the end of the movie and you still want to watch more movie.
Right. Well, I think that's part of why people, in fairness to people that like the first one much better than the other two, I think it's also because the first one, like, they could have not made any more, and the first one still stands on its own. Whereas, like, the second one would not be satisfying if there wasn't the third one.
Kind of cliffhangers.
Yeah, right. They're really like part 1 and 2 of, the same thing. Because when the first Matrix ends, I mean, you understand the world, you understand who Neo is, and he flies away, and that's kind of the end of it. And I didn't expect that there would be another one, but that was because back then we didn't live in a world of infinite sequels yet either, right? Like, I mean, you have some movies like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and stuff like that have multiple, or you have really bad versions like the Rambo movies or the Rocky movies that just would never stop being made, even to this day. But yeah, so I don't know. I didn't really have a clear expectation for a sequel, but was super stoked when it happened. And I don't know if you remember, but actually both the second and third ones came out in the same year. They released like 6 months apart. But they both have a release year of 2003. Which is kind of cool and kind of rare that you would get that. I mean, most movies that have sequels now, at best, you're getting it annually. And
right, yeah.
Most of the time it's 2 years, really. Like the new Star Wars franchise is every 2 years that you get another, in the main story movie or whatever. So I've probably watched the second movie more than any of the others. Mm-hmm. But I was just today actually was rewatching some of the first one, and yeah, it's interesting how they kind of introduce the supernatural of it all. I mean, obviously the very opening scene is Trinity, and there's some supernatural element there because she like disappears in thin air when she gets on the payphone and the Mack truck smashes the phone booth, and then she's just gone, and you don't really have an explanation as to why. And then the next thing that's really weird is when Neo is in the office complex running from the agents and ultimately gets captured, and then they like make his skin grow over his mouth.
Yeah.
And then he can't speak, and then they put the little bug thing in his belly, and then a couple scenes later that's taken out, and then a couple scenes later he's waking up in like the pod of humans that are all, eventually you find out, batteries basically. Did you have any idea what was going on? I was completely just flabbergasted by what was happening whenever he wakes up after he's touched the mirror or whatever.
Yeah. And
he first wakes up, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what any of this means.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the scene with Trinity where she's running from the agents and then, gets in the phone booth and the trash truck hits her. Like, I remember sitting there in the theater, not knowing what the, conclusion of this story was going to amount to.
Right.
And thinking, I was like, what phone call could have possibly come in that was that important, So I was totally lost at that point in time. I'm thinking, like, what the hell was that about? And they don't really provide you with an explanation, like you said, for a little while there.
Right.
So you're left wondering. And then, of course, when he's first talking to Smith, and his, his mouth grows together so he can't speak.
Mm-hmm.
There have been movies who have done things kind of like that, but it's the old standbys where you expect that he wakes up and he was having a bad dream, and it's going to tie into the story for some other reason.
Which kind of does happen, because then he does wake up.
Right.
To the computer or whatever.
But then before he wakes up in the human battery pillar farm thing, him and Morpheus had that conversation. So at that point, it kind of buttoned it up for me. I was like, oh, so that wasn't a dream. They actually intended to show actual events.
Right.
And then they framed it in a way that you understand why it was done in that way.
Right.
But did I see that coming? No, not at all.
Yeah.
So, came out of nowhere kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and I just, like, another thing that people... So the title of this episode is In Defense of the Matrix, because for years I've had to withstand these people complaining about it, and it's just all the things that people don't like, I just think are great. Like, people criticize its, like, kind of like philosophical type statements or whatever, but I think they're great. Like, I love... One of the first ones is when Neo gets picked up in the car by Trinity and Switch and APOC, and they're going to take the thing out of his belly, the little bug that's been put there. Yeah. And as soon as he gets in the car, they pull a gun on him, and then they tell him, it's up to you if you want to... If it's either our way or the highway, they say.
Yeah. And
so he's like, okay, and then starts to get out of the car. And then Trinity stops him, and she's like, please trust us. And he asks why, and she says, because you know where that road ends. And he's looking down a street, getting out of the car, and she's like, you know where that road ends, so you should just do this, and you should try this instead, because you know what happens at the end of that, and you don't know where this will go. Mm-hmm. And it's almost kind of like the perfect, like, foreshadowing for really, I think, the fundamental premise of the rest of the film, which is just choice, right? Like, which ultimately is driven home very much at the end of the third movie, but
yeah,
that, like, in the end, it's like you always have a choice as to what direction you're going to go, and then obviously that's presented again very quickly after that, but with the red pill and the blue pill, the most famous choice of the movies probably. But it's just kind of an interesting foreshadowing for, kind of, I think, the underlying theme of Neo's power throughout the whole thing, and it's his ability or his capacity to choose, which exists within everyone,
right,
but is very much brought to the forefront always, with him. And then you go through the first one and you get to, like, well, actually, even before I go into some more of the action stuff, the guy who plays Smith, I think his name's Hugo Weaving, is an incredibly perfect Smith. Like, you couldn't possibly have casted a better guy. Yeah. And it's not... the way he speaks is great, but it's also just his facial expressions. Like, the way his mouth looks when he says certain words is just, like... He just perfectly embodies the, like, stereotypical FBI, heartless suit kind of law enforcement person or whatever,
Yeah. Great demeanor for the character. And, he's been in a lot of things. You don't see him as like a leading man kind of a thing in anything, but really he's in more things than I had considered.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's in Lord of the Rings as the father of the elves, or whatever, not the father, but whatever, the leader of the elves. Yeah. And those movies came out right around the same time, The Lord of the Rings and The Matrix. And I remember thinking, like, that guy has to be, like, the most happy actor ever. Because
he's got it made, yeah.
He's in the best two franchises at that time of my life, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he's very good at doing the, like, kind of stoic thing. And anyway, I think he's probably just a good actor as well, but he's the perfect person for it in the look, but I'm sure a fair amount of work went into being reserved and doing these kind of things with his development of the character. But he did a great job. It was perfect.
It's funny because he comes across as intimidating, but if you actually look at him, he's just a skinny, balding man. Like, that's not the guy that you see and you're like, I don't want any piece of that. But with Smith, it's like you believe that he's a problem.
And if you don't, just watch the rest of the movies.
Right. Right, yeah, he's ultimate problem, actually. But yeah, so then, you go through the first one and, all of the scenes with the stuff where, like, Neo learns Kung Fu just by getting jacked into the Matrix, and just all of that kind of stuff was such a neat concept. Again, it was all of these different concepts in the movie or ideas in the movie. I just never thought of before. I'd never thought about, like, what if your brain could get hooked up to a computer and just have information just loaded into it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that look like? And I definitely know, you have known me for a very long time and know that I have never, even when thin, been able to jump very far or high. And definitely after watching the first Matrix, I thought maybe I could jump a lot higher if I just believed enough, you know? Like if I just could unlock my mind.
Yeah.
Now maybe that was true and I just never did it, right? Because no one gets it on the first time, they say, but... I tried more than once and it never worked.
Yeah.
But don't act like... Are you telling me as a kid you never sat and like tried to like telepathically control an object across the room just to see if maybe there was something?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, yeah. You wouldn't be... It'd be more embarrassing to be the guy, you know, if you reach 80 years old and somebody, you know, some old wise person comes out of the sky and like, hey, incidentally, we gave you telepathy and you didn't think that it would work, so you just never tried for your entire life.
You were too skeptical.
It's way more embarrassing to be the guy who can do it and never did than the guy who couldn't do it but tried.
Mm-hmm. That might be a life philosophy just for all things, right? But yeah, so, you know, the first movie, I would say probably the most, you know, the climax of it, at least from an action perspective, would be like when they get loaded in, when they go to the construct and they need guns, lots of guns, and then they're going to rescue Morpheus. Mm-hmm. And that whole scene, again, with Hugo Weaving as Smith, like, talking about how humanity is really just a parasite, and it doesn't deserve to survive, and it doesn't deserve to occupy the planet, basically. And it's an interesting position, and I'm sure not unique to that movie. I'm sure that's a sentiment that's been held prior to then. But man, I mean, you know, you see now in the modern times with all the climate change stuff that's going on, and I don't know how much you're aware of like what's going on in Australia, but there's wildfires there.
Yeah, I've seen some on that.
They estimate 500 million animals have perished. Like, not 1,000, 500 million. So when you see stuff like that, Smith's sentiment that humanity maybe isn't such a great thing for the rest of the things that exist on Earth kind of hits a little close to home.
Kind of holds water.
Yeah. It's it's a little tough.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason that the movies were so intriguing. You know, they're good action. You know, some people think they are. I guess maybe some people think they're not, or whatever it is. But they're action movies. They did well, but it's also there was a lot of thought, I think, that did go into what a lot of that content was. It wasn't just dodging bullets and shooting guys.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I definitely appreciate about it, is there's a lot of kind of gems that are there that maybe if you're not even looking for them, kind of get dropped in your lap.
Right.
So perhaps require more consideration later if you're, you know, one to do such a thing. But
well, and especially when you compare it to the action movies coming out around that. I mean, Steven Seagal used to be in the theater. I know that's hard to remember or believe if you weren't around then, but in the 90s, Steven Seagal movies were released in theaters. And yeah, so to see something like this as an action movie juxtaposed with a Van Damme movie or an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, like, it's just, there's just nothing else, you know, really like it. What's your favorite scene from the first one?
From the first movie, that'd be hard to say. I mean, the one where they're rescuing Morpheus is kind of the apex of that whole thing, but
yeah,
it's got a lot of good content in that part also. So I would have to say it's kind of the one where it would be the scene where when they've rescued Morpheus
mm-hmm.
and the helicopter's going down, and let's see, Morpheus jumps out of the helicopter, Trinity is piloting the helicopter and crashing, and Neo grabs the rope and, you know, disconnects it, so in hopes apparently that she grabs the other end and he holds her and she survives.
Right.
It's around that time. It's something about how, you know, I think Morpheus asks him or says to him, "So you finally believe you're the one," or something like this. And Neo says he doesn't know, but he was just not willing to not try anymore. So he knew that it was dangerous. He knew that he could, die or whatever else.
Right.
So it was a point where the distinction had been made, even though it hadn't in the larger sense that he doesn't necessarily think that he's the one, but the distinction that you're willing to tolerate so much, and on the other side of that is non-compliance. That's it, also, in essence, I think, what the movie's about, and they did a good job, I think, of framing that in a way where he doesn't have to be all-powerful yet, because he has the power that he eventually can exercise already.
Right.
And then later, him becoming the one is just kind of the evolution of them demonstrating that your ability to choose things grants you power that would be synonymous with that in a way.
Right. Yeah, it's the scene where they rescue Morpheus is definitely, like you said, the apex of the movie. Which, I mean, just not even just subjectively, just objectively, that's just the climax kind of the whole thing. But yeah, I just love all the little phrases that they have too, like when Neo says I think it's much earlier in the film, but he asks Morpheus, "Are you saying I can dodge bullets?" And Morpheus says, "No, what I'm telling you is that if you believe me," or I guess I don't remember the exact quote, but basically, you won't have to. Mm-hmm. And then that reveals itself at the end whenever he catches him, he's caught in the hallway with the agents and they all shoot at him, and he just holds his hand up and stops the bullets and just, flicks his wrist, and all the bullets just drop directly in front of him, as if there was some field, kind of protecting him. I don't know. Just super, super awesome.
Well, now that you mentioned that part, actually, I wonder if it's kind of an accidental foreshadowing thing, because when he goes to see the Oracle and she tells him about the vase that he's going to knock over, and she says, "What's going to, get to you later is would you have broken it if I hadn't said anything," right? So it's the know yourself kind of thing. So sitting here with us just talking about it, I wonder if, would Neo have thought he could stop bullets if Morpheus hadn't planted that seed?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Because he has no reason to think that he could do that, other than that now, since he believes he's the one, he thinks that he should be able to do that. So he just does it as though it's something that he's going to be able to do.
Right.
Even though he's never done it before.
Yeah, actually, so the helicopter scene and all that is definitely the best action scene. But here I go. Yet again, another scene that resonated with me a ton. That's one of the most famous scenes from the movie, but that I didn't understand until I was much older, and that's the scene with the little kid and the spoon. And he's bending the spoon around, and Neo asks him how he's doing it, and he tells him that he first has to understand that there is no spoon. And to some extent, they're in the Matrix, so it's literally there isn't a spoon, and you can make this do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. But it's also a larger truth of yet again, like, what you perceive and what you believe shapes what is then possible or real. So if you believe that this is a rigid spoon, then it is. But if you believe that it's not that, and that it's actually just whatever you make it, then that's what it is instead. Now, I have also tried to bend spoons using that methodology, and it does not work for me, at least. But I might not be the one, so...
Everybody's doing it wrong.
Yeah, I've always said that as much as I love all of it, I'm probably the guy who betrays them all, Cypher. Because...
ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, he's like, just give me the steak and the money, and it's fine. I'll go back. Now, the only part is I don't know that I could sell out all my friends that hard, because that's pretty cruel, how he gets all of them killed, and even kills one of them, or two of them, but he's not wrong about it being pretty sweet to just be rich and have steak and not have to worry about, the world that they actually occupy, which is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, are there any trees? I guess not, because there's no sun or whatever.
It doesn't appear to be anything green.
This is just cables. Well, that's something also that I never recognized until going back and rewatching them as I was older, is that anytime they're in the Matrix, there's a slight green tint to everything, and there's just constantly green things in the frames. So, like, the exit signs, like every exit sign I've ever seen in like a corporate type building or something, an office building, it's red, like orange letters for exit. But in the first Matrix, like whenever he's in his office at the very beginning and the agents come to capture him, he stands up and looks over the cubicle and there's an exit sign, and the text of that is a very vibrant green color. And I was like, huh, I never even I didn't realize it was to that level of nuance that they tried to plug the green into the Matrix to kind of, indicate where things were happening.
That's interesting. I didn't know that was a resource that they were kind of trying to...
Right. It's very subtle, I mean, when I say it's tinted green, it's not like it looks unbelievable or something. Right, it's just basically like, for example, the first scene when Trinity's running from the agents at the very opening of the movie, when she's running across the rooftops, it looks like it's just nighttime and rainy, so the roofs have kind of a sheen to them, and it's dark. So it doesn't really look... It's not like a blatant lime green or something, but there is actually just kind of a greenish tint to those rooftops and that kind of stuff. So, we go to the second Matrix movie. The second Matrix movie just has a ton of stuff that I like. Two things that I like would be Jada Pinkett Smith and Roy Jones Jr. Super thrilled to see both of them cast in the movie. I love... Roy Jones Jr. I don't love as an actor because I don't know if he's ever acted in anything before or since then. If he has, it didn't do well. But he's a really, really famous boxer from the 90s, for those of you who are not familiar. I would argue one of the greatest boxers of all time. But yeah, so to see him in it was super cool. And then Jada Pinkett Smith is actually a really great actor. Like, she was excellent in that movie. Like, she does a very good job of embodying the character that she's supposed to play, Morpheus' kind of former lover or whatever.
Yeah.
So the second one, does it start out with them in the meeting and the agents come knock on the door or whatever?
Yes, pretty much. Because Morpheus is late showing up and they're wondering where he was. But yeah, that's pretty much the opening sequence. So they jump off with the action pretty straight away.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, the way that bullet time obviously became a huge phenomenon after that and was super popular and used in a lot of stuff, but like just the I don't know if it's called animation since it's a live action movie, but the animation of the agents when they're dodging bullets and you kind of see like a trail of their body or whatever as they're moving around. Super cool. Like, love that effect. Never seen anything like it before. The fight scene that going back to the first one that Smith and Neo have in the subway or whatever, when Smith is like punching him in the stomach, I don't know, 100 times a second or something. I don't know what it's supposed to simulate, but just super cool looking. So you go into the second one. They're kind of establishing that Neo is... Because he just, like, runs around and, like, flies all over the Matrix doing stuff, I guess. They say, where's Neo going? And the ship operator goes, he's doing his Superman thing again. And then it's just him. I don't know what he does. I don't know if he rescues kittens from trees or something, or what he spends his time doing. But anyway, so the second movie is pretty much non-stop action from the time that they go see the Frenchman. Which I don't actually know what his name is. I mean, I know they call him the Merovingian, but I don't know if I'm saying that. I'm just recreating a sound. I have no idea how that's spelled, what it looks like, what it means.
I don't know that he has a name other than that. Just they call him the Merovingian.
Yeah. But so he has this whole crew of misfit programs, basically, that are all like, that basically serve to explain the supernatural phenomenon that's throughout human history. So there's some that look like vampires and some that are like ghosts and that kind of fill in these old myths or whatever about these monsters or something. Because like when they go to kill two of his lackeys or whatever later, when his wife Persephone threatens them. She threatens one of them with silver, which is like the vampire killer thing. And I think maybe he even has the canines or whatever.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
I don't remember if he has canines or not, but it seems like he might have the vampire teeth. But I'm actually I'm kind of struggling to recall what is happening prior. Oh, they go back to Zion. I guess that's what happens. They do the meeting and then they go back to Zion, and that's where all the people are like worshiping Neo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's. I think that there was an animatrix, or there was some bit of that universe's lore story that had been told between the first and the second movie, and it was something about how Neo had freed a lot of other people who were now in Zion. Because if you remember, there's that young kid who comes up and is following him around a lot of the movie and thanking him profusely and all this stuff. And he says, "You set me free." And he says, "No, kid, you set yourself free," or something like that.
Yep.
Which I didn't follow. I never knew just from the course of watching the 3 movies. But I think that there was something maybe in the Animatrix that spoke to that.
I don't know. I don't remember if there was or not. The Animatrix is also excellent and is worth everyone's time if you haven't seen it. But yeah, I don't remember I don't know if there was something, but you're right. Yeah, that is the relationship with him and that kid, and all of them very much view him as like this deified savior type character.
Well, I think there's still a deviation among the population in Zion, that is the believers and the non-believers.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, all the people show up in mass to give their thanks, or their
right.
Like they're almost praying or something to him, like a deity or something.
Right. Because then they go have the. Is that when they have the party? That's in the second one still, right? That's not in the third one.
Yeah, the party is in the second one.
Okay. Yeah. The dance party
sure
thing or
about
whatever. That. Yeah, I'm pretty confident too.
Because they have to go back to. So Morpheus at the meeting asks for a ship to stay behind in their stead because they need to go back to Zion and recharge their ship or something.
Right.
So Morpheus goes back and then is immediately reprimanded by Commander Locke and all that stuff.
Yep.
So that's why they're there, and they're waiting on the other ship to come return word, I think, from the Oracle, maybe.
Yeah, and then when they go back, that's when they go see the Frenchman. Whenever they leave Zion.
Yeah, because the Oracle tells them
about the Keymaker, I think.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Keymaker is one of the cooler concepts for a character. I love characters like that have very little explanation, and it's kind of like that Sturgill Simpson Sound and Fury thing where there's just a lot of things that just are, and the creators don't really take any time to justify it. Mm-hmm. Which I kind of like because it just kind of makes you accept it. Whereas if they take the time to justify it, then you can start to pick it apart.
Right, start asking too many questions.
Yeah, the suspension of disbelief is stripped away. So the second one, I guess it's before they go see the Frenchman, is where he fights Smith in the courtyard, for lack of a better term. Because he goes to see the Oracle and they're visiting, and then the Oracle leaves and Smith shows up and replicates himself. And there's like 100 Smiths or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Neo fights him. A lot of people really hate that scene, and I think that's a scene that a lot of people point to as like why the Matrix isn't that great. It does have a computer animated Neo in it, which doesn't look that great by today's standards, but
right, yeah.
I don't actually care. Like, I thought it was fine. The only part of it that's a little, like, you could have done without that is when he swings the one Smith around and hits several others and it plays a bowling pin noise, and it's like, that's kind of...
Yeah, whoever made the executive decision on that one, they needed to...
It's just a little cheeky.
Cut that one out, yeah. Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, that whole scene is super cool when because he rips the stop sign pole out of the ground and like breaks the concrete off of it, I think on one of the Smiths, and then has like a pole, and now it's like bow staff time, and it's like, oh, this is what I've always wanted. Show me all of it. But yeah, so they go see the Frenchman, and that again leads to one of my favorite scenes in all of the movies. And that's when they leave the conversation with the Frenchman. So they've asked him for the Keymaker, and he says no. and they get back on the elevator, and Trinity says, do you think that went how it was supposed to? And Morpheus says, it went exactly how it was supposed to. And she says, but we didn't get what we came for. How do you know that it was right? And he says, because we're still alive. And I really liked that, that idea, I guess, of kind of like, well, if you haven't, in that example, if you haven't failed in the sense that now you're dead, right? If you can continue on, then it's not wrong, it's not bad, it's not over, because you can still persist, you can still continue.
Right.
It's not, there's no finality to this. And then that's when Persephone leaves his wife and goes and gets the keymaker and betrays the Frenchman or whatever. And then from then on, it's just nonstop nutso action. I mean, you get the highway scene where Trinity gets on the Ducati bike. That's super cool. Mm-hmm. We all had motorcycles when that came out. I remember definitely going and riding my motorcycle after seeing that.
At a very safe speed.
Well, it was me, so yes. Yes, it was actually kind of a safe speed because I didn't want to get hurt, but and I wasn't riding head on into traffic or anything like she does.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the fight scene on top of the semi, like with actually just that whole sequence with the agents where like the one agent jumps out of his car and lands on the hood of another one and it like completely crushes it and flips it end over end. Like, again, who's thought of this? Like I'd never had considered a man jumping on a car and that happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And me thinking it was going to be cool.
Yeah, you thinking that he wouldn't just fall off and hurt himself right away.
Right. Now that's what I think about just about anywhere I think that I might jump, is that I would probably shortly thereafter fall and hurt myself, but but yeah, I don't know. I mean, is there what scenes stand out to you from the second Matrix?
That's hard too. It's hard coming up with anything for the first movie, but the second one, since it is so fast paced and nonstop, there's just a ton going on there.
Yeah, well, I mean, so you get the highway scene, and then after the highway, well, I guess before the highway scene, you get the scene where he's fighting the Merovingians dudes in the Merovingians' house, because I think do they try and shoot him again, and he stops it or something? I don't know. Something happens where he impresses them, Neo, that is, being he, but then he bleeds, and the Merovingians like, see, he's just a man. And as if, like, how could he possibly compete with these AI bots or whatever? And then they have one of the cooler martial arts fighting sequences that I've ever seen.
That is a really good sequence. But also there's a part there where, so the Merovingians henchmen all shoot at him. They unload, and he has the stop bullet thing again, and then that's when he stops the sword and bleeds right thereafter.
Okay.
But at any rate, the Merovingian says something like, I've survived your predecessors, and I'll survive you as well.
Yes.
And I remember that being like a think piece where what other guys that have come in here to like be mean? What predecessors are we talking about?
Right.
And then of course that unfolds later in the story, but it's another bit of interesting kind of foreshadowing where you have a character who's, the depth of that character has been expressed to be vast, but you don't know. What is he? Just a powerful businessman? Does he own a restaurant and make cake for
women that go to the bathroom? Right.
But yeah, that plays out, and then you kind of get to see, he has his hand in a lot of pots apparently,
right,
and kind of knows something about what's going on, and then is elusive at the same time. So. It's like the level 2 of how strong are you kind of a thing, because Neo's, the first movie ends, he's the one, he's powerful, all this stuff, and then you run into the Merovingian who is pretty prepared for a lot of things like that.
Right.
And even though Neo's strong, he can just kind of dip out, and he's got the doors that lead to anywhere.
Right.
So then it's another point of intrigue. Neo's got another mountain to have to climb, which keeps it compelling.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they actually do that a few times. Like, in the first one, whenever he gets in the car, that scene I was talking about earlier where Trinity tells him, where that road ends, so, choose a different one. Whenever he gets in the car, APOC, no, not Switch, the woman, she pulls a gun on him, and he says, "What is this?" And she says, "Listen, Copper Top, it's our way or the highway." And it's a reference to calling him a battery, but at that point in the movie, you have no context for why she would call him Copper Top. He doesn't have red hair, so it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But but it's the same kind of deal where it's a tiny bit of foreshadowing for what will later be revealed. So yeah, so the action sequences of the second one are just absolutely phenomenal. I've watched that. I could watch any of them at any time probably, but that one I have just watched more than the others by a large margin because it's just so entertaining. However, what you were just alluding to is actually where the movies just it's where the second movie blew my mind all over again, because the first movie blew my mind, and the second one, for most of it, is kind of just more of the same. It's just an extension of what you learned in the first movie to be true, and they're just kind of filling in more around those ideas. But then at the end of all of that action, the reason there's all that action is it culminates with them going to visit the architect, who's supposedly the creator of the Matrix or whatever. And again, this is a scene that a lot of people criticize and say that it's one of the reasons they don't like the movie. They think it's pretentious or whatever. I love every part of it. I love the way the architect speaks. I love the language he uses, and what he reveals that there are predecessors, that this is all yet another system of control, the entire premise of Zion and the One and all of that. Again, blew my mind. Had no idea that that's where it was going. Definitely thought that it was just going to be Neo versus the machines for 3 movies, which it still technically is, but I didn't foresee that he was not really the one and only one, and instead is just some programmatic anomaly, as the architect explains it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also really interesting how, like I will constantly complain about love stories in action movies, and when I do that, people will take that to mean that I don't like love stories, and that's not true. I just don't like them when they're poorly told, and in a lot of action movies they are, because that's not what the movie's about. That's not what the people making the movie are there to make. They're there to make explosions and fights, not love story. So the love story's terrible. But in The Matrix, I actually find the relationship between Neo and Trinity very compelling and believable, and it does seem like two lovers partnered to go through, the adventure that they're then on. And so that's again where Neo differs from all of his predecessors, is that the architect is surprised that he doesn't feel compelled to save humanity and instead is only compelled to save Trinity.
Yeah.
And then leaves to go do that. It is a little cheesy when he takes the bullet out of her and says, "I love you too damn much."
Yeah.
If he didn't say the word damn, I think it works.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
It's just a little too on the nose or something, where it's just like, what, man? But yeah, what did you think of the architect scene the first time you saw it? Did it surprise you? Had you expected anything like that at all? Had you seen anything like that before at all?
No, not at all. And I thought that the scenario that they built in order to get access to the architect was very cool. So the use of the keymaker and the conflict over who had control of the keymaker provided what the stakes were.
Mm-hmm.
So not only the architect itself was mind-blowing,
right?
But they do a very good job of making it, proving how important it really is to get there, in the challenges they had to face to get there.
Right.
But, that said, I liked the architect as well, because, again, I think that actor and, whoever they were doing with the direction of the movie and everything like this, they did a very good job of making it seem like what a machine would say, almost, because he speaks directly to what the point is. There's no, beating around the bush or innuendos or hinting at stuff. He just kind of says what it is, and those are the facts, right?
Well, and he uses kind of complicated language, but I think the reason that makes sense in that context is because, exactly to your point, he's not... There's nothing, there's nothing nonsensical about it. So he uses very specific words to convey very specific meanings, which is exactly what a machine would do. Whereas a person, like me on this podcast, bumbles around with words a lot and tries to find the way to say it and does talk around things and, whatever. But...
And with the lack of specificity, language is just a difficult thing.
Right.
So a word can have many meanings
mm-hmm.
to the recipient, and unless it's so specific that word doesn't mean anything else.
Right. Right.
So efficiency and optimization is a thing that people do often, but also don't do very often.
Right.
So I appreciated the directness of what the architect had to say. Consider, if you're putting yourself in the movie, in that scenario and all this, you've had to talk to 6 other guys or however many ones there were, and who knows who these people were. You have to explain something that complex to people over and over and over. I can certainly see using language that would leave the least amount to be determined by the recipient as possible.
Right. Right. Well, and especially because he actually does have a vested interest in wanting there to be a certain outcome.
Right.
Which is that Neo will go sacrifice himself and start the whole process over. But yeah, just so it also just made the machine seem that much more, because you kind of think that maybe Neo's got one on him, like they weren't ready for him, and it's like not only were they ready, they designed it, to be ready, like
yeah, it's been ready the entire time. What you've been doing is the machine's version of "you're ready."
Right. Right. But yeah, man, the second Matrix movie, just through and through, awesome. I would argue the best of the 3. Again, I like all 3 of them and have really no major criticisms of any of them, but I think the second one is the most fun to watch, because like we said, there's all the action. There's not really any firm resolution, so it just kind of gets to be fun the whole time. And you get that revelation from the architect, which is just crazy. I never would have seen that coming.
That's the one where you and I had to go back and even re-listen to that recently.
Yeah.
And to understand what the, not an ultimatum, but what the scenario actually consisted of. I had misunderstood that for a very long time.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot to pick up there, but it's that much more spectacular whenever you do realize that the whole thing was within a measure of the machine's control and intended.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah.
That one was big.
Yeah, I mean, basically, just for anyone else who, is like, what is it? What are you talking about? Effectively, the machines know that that there will be an anomaly that doesn't have to observe the rules, you could say, of the Matrix, and will be able to do whatever they want within it. And so that's a problem for them. So they basically create Zion and this little pocket of humanity and the lore around the One, so that those people will actively seek out the One, so that the machines can find it when it happens again and catch it and then repeat the whole... It's basically like they use humanity as like their virus scanner. Is kind of a very simple way to put it.
They don't have to look for the One because the humans will look for the One for them.
Right. And the humans will be under... Not all of the machines know that's what they're doing, I don't think. Like, I don't think the Sentinels or the agents, right? Like Smith and his buddies that are chasing them around in the Matrix, I don't think they're aware that Morpheus is actually part of this larger plan to seek out the One. So the point being that the people are actively under pressure to not be able to succeed from the machine, so it makes them actually be even better at it because they really have to try. Like, they can't just half-ass their looking.
Create the resistance.
Right, exactly.
Be able
So, I mean, the second movie ends with Neo kind of using his power outside of the Matrix because he shuts down the Sentinel that is like there to attack them or whatever. And so that was also kind of strange. Like I definitely didn't expect to see that either. And so then that leads right into the third movie. And the third movie, I don't know that I remember the opening scene.
He's in the train station.
Oh, he is. I love that scene. I forgot that was how it opens. Yes. That is, again, such a cool, again, actually kind of undescribed and not justified, but just a cool idea of, like, the train man who can just keep people in prison effectively, indefinitely, in some unknown reality where they're between the Matrix and the real world. And then they go, because who do they go and see? Is it the Merovingian again?
Later in the movie, yes.
Okay. Well, I thought they go and see him to free Neo from the train man. Because isn't that where Trinity shows up? And
yeah, they find out that the train man works for the Merovingian.
Okay.
So they have to go to the Merovingian to get to the train man to get to the train station.
Right. Because Merovingian's not about to be punked, and then Trinity puts a gun to his head or something and threatens to kill him, and then he concedes. I'm jumping around a bit, but I also really always liked the scene with Neo and Persephone, which I believe is in the second one, but when she makes Neo kiss her like she's Trinity or whatever, and so he kisses her once, and she's like, come on, that doesn't count. That's not going to work. And so then he actually has to do it. And I thought that was a really kind of interesting scene, because it just, like, there can be a lot of magic or a lot of power in something as small as a kiss, right? But I thought that the movie did a really great job of kind of illustrating that through that scene and kind of, I don't know, maybe romanticizing it to some extent, for lack of a better word. Anyway, I just thought of that thinking of the Merovingian, because Persephone's there with him again when Trinity goes to kill him, or, free Neo the second time.
Yeah.
Whenever I think of the third one, honestly, the scene that jumps out to me the most is the guy who's like the sergeant or whatever of the human army, and when he gets in the big mech and is like shooting them as they come in, and then just gets lashed to pieces. Yeah. Like I don't know if that's fair for that to be the, like, first thing I think of when I think of the third movie, but that's definitely it. Like, I associate the third movie a lot with those scenes of, like, the big mech things fighting the Sentinels as they pour in to Zion.
Well, it would be really that stitches right in with the fabric of, how we described the end of the second movie there, where humanity is so driven by all these emotions that it's so predictable that the machines can count on it. Well, since that was a measure of control by the machine in the first place, they sold their process here so hard that guy, I think I want to say Captain Mafuni or something.
Yeah, something like Mahoney. I don't know.
But he, that scene stands out because you can tell that he's just dug in. He's going to grit his teeth and bear it, and he's willing to die in a horrific way for a cause. Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, that cause is actually what the machines wanted in the first place, but he has no idea about that.
Right.
So the salesmanship, as I keep saying it, or whatever, this package that's been delivered is so strong because you can count on human beings being emotional. So if you know that they're going to be emotional, give them something to be emotional about, and they won't deviate.
Right.
And they'll do exactly what you need them to do, provided you can guide them.
Right.
But also it's strength of will. I think it shows two things. It's that the people, they do believe their back's against the wall. I mean, it is.
Right. Even if it's fabricated, it still literally is. Yeah. Well, so that's what the architect also kind of describes, and I think that's what you and I kind of talked about, is that, so the whole process with the architect and the cycle of the one is that the one returns himself to the source code, but before he does that, he chooses, I think it's like 13 individuals, 7 women and 6 men, or I don't know what the breakdown is, but something like that. and they restart Zion. Well, so what that does is those 13 people know the one. So the people who refound Zion believe that this guy is real because he really was. He rescues them and then
frees them.
And then dies or whatever, is gone, and says he'll return eventually, which he will. But it's all just a big sham, which is deeply dissatisfying if you know. Now, they don't ever, most of those people that die in that war, so I guess they were never unsatisfied by that. But I also thought it was interesting, and this might be, again, a scene from the second one, but when Neo is talking to the guy who's like the mayor, or whatever you want to call him, of the Zion.
One of the councilmen.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know if he's even the head, but whatever. Yeah, the councilman. And they're talking about the interrelationship between humans and machines, and how he's like, it's funny because we're fighting all these machines, except that our entire existence here is based off of these machines, and I don't know how any of them work. I don't know what any of... I just know what its function is, like what its purpose is, but I don't actually know how it achieves what it's supposed to achieve. And then relates that to... That's his understanding of Neo as well, is that Neo is going to achieve something, but he doesn't actually understand how Neo will achieve that.
Yeah.
So in the third movie, you also get... Actually, something that's kind of a side note. So in the third movie, the Oracle, who we haven't really talked very much about, but super cool character, very fascinating part of the movies. But the actress who played the Oracle in the first and the second movie dies before they film the third one.
Yeah.
So they switch out the actress. But I don't know if there's a better movie where that could happen and the viewer be like, yep, totally makes sense. Because it's The Matrix, so she could be anyone. And like, you don't question it at all. Whereas like, there's a movie series, there's at least two of them, Major League, that's these baseball comedy movies from the 90s. Well, the first one stars Wesley Snipes, and the second one, the same character, is played by Omar Epps. And that was the first time I had ever seen that happen, where it's
an actor swap out.
Yeah, and I remember like just being really confused, and like the first time I watched it, like constantly trying to figure out if it actually was Wesley Snipes, and I just couldn't tell. But it's not. It's Omar Epps. But anyway, there it kind of was strange. But yeah, in The Matrix it works. So something I watched the other day, LeBron James has this show on HBO called The Shop. It's like a barbershop setting, and he just invites in different people, celebrities and sports figures and that sort of stuff. And he had Will Smith on. And it turns out Will Smith was actually originally supposed to be the one, and Val Kilmer was supposed to be Morpheus.
Wow.
Now, I mean, exact same script and everything. I just don't think it works with that, because Will Smith is too powerful of a... Like, I mean, he's a great actor, so maybe he could have pulled it off, but it would just be hard to... Like, Keanu Reeves is very believable as kind of a, like, who is this guy? Like, he's just kind of an idiot, kind of seeming. But Will Smith is, like, so... He's like Black Tom Cruise. Like, he's, like, so full of energy and confidence, and, like, it would just be kind of hard to believe him as this, like, bumbling guy who doesn't get it.
Yeah, I think you just see the opening scene where he's, at the computer and whatever, and you're like, whatever's going to happen, Will Smith is going to win. So,
right.
fine.
That's what I mean. Like, it's just like it's Will Smith. And like, I mean, I don't know if this would have been normal Val Kilmer or if it would be modern fat Val Kilmer, but that would also be a tough sell that he is the wise one that like knows more than Will Smith about anything. I mean, I don't know Val Kilmer. Maybe he's brilliant.
Yeah.
I just don't believe it right now.
Well, I saw like a behind the scenes something. It was probably before the shooting of the second movie.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a crazy workout schedule for martial arts training and all this stuff. It was like 6 months straight of like 2-a-days equivalent kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Doing Neo had to do the bow staff. Morpheus had a lot of katana work and stuff like that, and a lot of conditioning. So
Well, and
I wonder, Val Kilmer getting out there doing that. I have no idea what these people's ages are. Him is a
in 2003 again,
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, I know modern Val Kilmer is hilarious looking, but yeah, well, and so also another one is that the architect was supposed to be Sean Connery originally, which I also feel like would have detracted from that scene.
It's too much of an iconic presence.
It would feel like a cameo.
Yeah, exactly.
Not like the architect.
Yeah.
It would be like, oh, Sean Connery showed up. Look at that. Like, up next, Harrison Ford.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck off.
Yeah, I think the cast was great.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it's interesting just because, like, you see the movie as it is, and obviously there's not another way for it to be because it already exists, but, like, yeah, to picture those different actors in those roles. Well, and so on The Shop, there's another guy that was on that episode with Will Smith is a guy named Chance the Rapper, who's a very famous hip-hop artist at this point, obviously with the name. And he actually said that he, as a young kid, really appreciated that Morpheus was Lawrence Fishburne because he thought he really resonated with the idea that it was a black dude who was like the one that was like leading everybody. Because even though Neo's the one, none of that happens without Morpheus is the glue that holds everything else together. And I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective. I had, personally not considered that. I'm white, so that's a thing, but
He spoke to a certain audience, kind of iconic. In a way.
And well, and like he said, because he says to Will Smith, he's like, "I'm really glad that you didn't do it." Because the question, how it came up was, they were like, "Do you regret any of the movies that you made?" And Will Smith was like, "No, not really. I mean, I make jokes about the Wild West, but whatever." And he's like, "Honestly, I regret stuff that I didn't make, a la The Matrix." And then that's when Chance is like, "I'm glad that you didn't, because while you might have been good in it, it would have made Morpheus be a white guy, which changes a lot of the dynamic for how he perceived it or whatever." And I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting too. Again, I hadn't really considered that, but, interesting sentiment. So then, you go through the third one, and that's when Smith is kind of actually revealed fully. I mean, it starts in the second one, but you kind of have the full understanding because he's able to basically transfer his consciousness through the real world because he takes over that Bane guy or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he is revealed to really be the villain of the movies, even more so than the machines. Not that the machines are their allies now or something, but Smith is definitely the big bad guy because the machines don't know how to stop him either. So that's when Neo and Trinity take the ship and decide that they're going to go to, like, the heart of the machine capital, or I don't remember what phrasing they use. But that also... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, the Machine City, or...
Yeah, something like that.
Essentially the capital.
But it leads to one of my all-time favorite scenes from those movies as well, which I always think about now when I get on an airplane. And it's the scene where they're flying and they're trying to dodge all the missiles or whatever that are being lobbed at them. And so they fly through the atmosphere, or through the sky or whatever, and kind of break through. Because the lore of it is that the machines have blocked out the sun in order to hurt humanity further and prevent them from having daylight, I guess.
Well, I think the people...
Oh, you're right.
...blocked out the sun to prevent the machines from having access to solar power.
You are absolutely correct, yes. Yep, that is true. Yeah, so it's almost like humanity's own, like, they've, like, dug their own grave to some extent. But anyway, so they break through this, like, layer of, like, smog and pop out, and it's just, like, this beautiful blue sky, just like you see whenever you fly in an airplane and end up above the clouds or whatever. And it's just so serene, and it's like it's just this like moment of like tranquility and beauty, and then it lasts for like 4 seconds, and then the ship plummets back down into the bowels of hell, if you will. Well, Ultimately culminating, though, with Neo giving himself over to the machines and fighting Smith. Now, I've never watched Dragon Ball Z. I personally think that the end scene between Neo and Smith is awesome. In the rain, when there's like the infinite Smiths in the city or whatever, and they're like fighting, and there's the huge water shock waves and stuff. Like, I think it looks super cool. I'm totally into it. But a lot of people I have talked to about it say that they feel like it's just a direct ripoff, I guess, of like Dragon Ball Z fights, and so they don't find
Somehow
it compelling.
That invalidates it because it resembles something else that they've seen ever.
Which literally everything is derivative, so
Right.
Welcome to life. But yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it, but my guess is that it probably is a nod to that. I mean,
It's very popular.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. And yes, it is very similar.
Right, but
that doesn't mean anything.
right. But that's kind of the, early when we were talking, I talked about how choice is kind of the theme throughout the whole thing, and Neo is constantly making his own choices and not just doing whatever he's been told. Non-compliance, like you said. And that's kind of where I said it's really driven home at the end, and because Smith just continually beats Neo over and over, and finally says, why? Like, why do you continue? And Neo just says, because I choose to. And that's like, in essence, the thing that the machine can't understand, because to the machine, everything is a logic problem where there's just one answer. There's never a choice. It's just binary. You wouldn't do this, you would do this.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. That's always been the whole series of movies has always been very powerful for me and resonated with me a lot because of that theme. I think. Is there any other theme that you can think of that really stands out to you throughout the films?
No, not something that's just jumping directly to mind. I'm sure I could sit through and watch them again and have a whole
Right.
another hour's worth of things to say about it. But,
Right.
Yeah, I know. When we first talked about this as a concept, in defense of the Matrix,
Right.
That was kind of like a mind bender to me. I was like, wait a minute, what are we defending? This is a great movie. Everyone loves this. And then of course I find, as with anything, there are haters out there.
Right.
But I hadn't even considered it.
Right.
So, there's just a ton there, and I think it's just one of those things where people don't like to have to be introspective.
Yep.
So, and you can see that live just every single day, anywhere you go. So it's not surprising that I'll say it was like perhaps a tough pill to swallow for people.
Right.
Not in that they can't conceptualize the meaning of the movie, but I guess I could see how people would take that kind of a cop-out angle of saying like, oh, that's not profound. Of course you can choose. And it's like, well, that's why cliches are cliches, because they're so applicable, but it's that they became too common, and now people have forgotten their meaning.
Right.
So it's like a lot of things where you could get as much from it as you want or as little as you want.
Right. Yes, I agree completely. I mean, it's almost kind of like it's kind of like my relationship with the band Tool, where you get whatever it is when you first consume it, and if that's all you want, then that's all you can take, and it is what it was, and that's fine. But you can also elect to continue like peeling back the layers of the onion, and there's just always a little bit more and a little bit more, and it's a little bit more interesting and a little bit more insightful. And yeah, I think The Matrix does that very well also, all three of the movies. Another complaint that people have had is that at the end of the third one, when Neo is going to sacrifice himself to the machines or going to fight Smith or whatever, he gets into like the machines kind of create like a chair almost for him, but his arms are outstretched to his side, so it's kind of a cross symbolism, like he's being crucified or whatever. So a lot of people told me, at least I especially remember when it came out, that they found that troubling, that it was using this like Christian iconography or whatever. And again, I would compare that actually to the Dragon Ball Z thing, where I don't think that the movie is in any way trying to say Neo is Jesus. However, I do think that if it's more than just a chair, which is actually all I thought it was the first time I saw it, or just like a place for him to be suspended while he gets jacked into the program or whatever. Again, it turns out that Christianity's been around for 2,000 years, so it's a very old thing. And the symbol, or the idea of the cross being a symbol for sacrifice, for self-sacrifice for a greater good, is valid. Because that is what Neo is doing. He is sacrificing his own self for the greater good. And yeah, it ends with kind of this like tacit agreement between the machines and people, where people are given the option now if they want to stay in the Matrix. It doesn't really elaborate too much on that, but that's kind of where it wraps up. And it has the little girl who was with Neo. There's that family that's with him in the train station at the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen things online. I haven't actually read very much about it because I don't want it to be true. So I've hidden my eyes from it. But supposedly there's maybe another Matrix movie in the works. I don't know. I don't know if the Wachowski people are involved again with it. If so, then maybe it's fine. They made another show on Netflix within the last few years called Sense8 that was really bad. So I'm not even very eager to see them go back to it and mess with it again.
Yeah. Well, they did Cloud Atlas, I think, too, didn't they?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't actually seen that.
I think that's correct.
Okay.
I can't swear to it, but
and that's one of your favorite films, right?
I wouldn't go.
Oh, okay.
But I liked it. It's interesting.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's a Wachowski.
Okay.
But it's along the same lines where there's things to think about. Kind of film. It's
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, like you've said, I think that's very accurate. I mean, with The Matrix, you get a really excellent action movie, but then you also get something that's a little deeper that you can actually think about, as opposed to, I joked earlier about Seagal and Van Damme and those movies, but even modern action movies, which would be like The Avengers or any of the Marvel movies or whatever, or even like The Dark Knight, which I think people would say that the Christopher Nolan Batman movies are like more, I don't know, higher quality movies or something than the Avengers movies. But even those, there's not a lot to think about. You kind of just, like, here's a good guy, here's a bad guy, they're fighting. If the good guy didn't win yet, that's because there's more sequels. If the good guy won, it's the end of the films. And that's kind of it. Like, There's not really much else to it. Whereas with The Matrix, no one really wins, other than Smith loses, I guess, and that's a good thing. But
yeah, annihilation is averted, but other than that, you still have to kind of figure out how to continue.
Right. Because I don't really understand how it makes sense that you could ask if you wanted to be in the Matrix or not. Maybe that's actually just another trick by the machines, because, again, if I stepped out and it was like, hey, do you want to live here in the subway, or would you like to live in the virtual world where it's awesome? I'd be like, well,
load me up.
Take the virtual world. Now, to be clear, I don't live in a subway now, and if the Matrix became available today, I would not know of you anymore unless you people join me in the Matrix, because I'm gone. I'm in it. You know what I mean? I'm not going to kill anyone to get there, but yeah, I would definitely get jacked in. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for joining me for the conversation. This is one that we've wanted to have for quite a while, and I love the Matrix movies so much, and I felt so compelled to put something out there that is a bulwark against the hatred of the Matrix, because it shouldn't exist. It's too good for people to not like it. Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Cool, man. that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much, Nick Cunningham, for stopping by and joining the show today. And thank you, Misha Zarens, again, for providing the music for the show. I also want to mention Ozarks Food Harvest, which is a local food bank here in southwest Missouri that helps provide meals to needy families and children. I highly encourage you, if you're in the local area in southwest Missouri, to donate or volunteer with Ozarks Food Harvest, as they're a really well-run organization. However, if you're in another part of the world, of the country, I strongly encourage you to locate your local food bank and see how you can help out there. Hunger is a problem that we absolutely can solve, and the food banks are there to help accomplish that. I also want to invite you to like, rate, subscribe, whatever the application you listen to the podcast through lets you do. It does help it become more discoverable. But beyond that, I ask that you just tell a friend, share it with someone else if you enjoy these episodes, and kind of help spread the word. As always, couldn't appreciate you listening more, so thanks so much, and have a great rest of the week.